First, I would like to thank the organization for the invitation. And I'm going to use with the opportunity here, talk a little bit more than the subject says. I'd like to talk a little bit about the use of SexedULTRA on in vivo and in vitro embryo production, and about stimulated and non-stimulated heifers. Not everybody knows me. I've been working with sexing technologies for 10 years, and I'm kind of responsible for all the embryo department and in vitro fertilization department of the company. And recently, I was changed to the international sales department. For all this time, I've been the glass roof of the company for all the problems involving sex semen in U.S. and around the world. People learned my phone number, and everybody was calling me to say bad things about the technology, and nobody was calling me to say good things about it. So I asked Dr. Looney to talk a little bit about SexedULTRA, because I'm very proud of the work did by Sexing Technologies developing this new technology. As everybody knows, I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology history and then the new technology and the results of using the SexedULTRA and in vivo and in vitro embryos. As everybody know, this is the old machine that was developed by XY, and that was used for a long time to sort semen. The machine was a huge, heavy, hard-operated equipment, and the sorting process was done based on DNA size, and the sperm cell was, stained. The machine recognized and differentiates the sex by the size of the chromosome, and the machine put an electrical charge to each drop that should have one sperm, and that drop runs through a electrical magnetic field and sort males and females. And historically, we were seeing a great difference between sex semen and conventional semen on artificial insemination. That was around 10%, as shown here, Dr. Pietro Braugelli, in a study done in 2007. Again, another study done in Denmark showing the use of sex semen in different dairy breeds, and with overall average of between sex semen and conventional semen, showing that the sex semen had 86% of the fertility of the conventional semen. So we got to a point where the adoption to increase the use of sex semen was the lower fertility compared to conventional semen. And the average result was estimated to be 75 to 80% of the conventional. So Sexing Technology developed a process to identify the main causes of the reduction of fertility of sex semen, and improved the sex semen technique process with new equipment, new software, and the biochemical process as well. So the whole process was divided in 21 steps, and these 20 steps were subdivided in mainly 7 steps that include, since since the collection, the ejaculate collection, the sperm preparation, the staining process, the sorting, cooling and concentration, freeze, and post-hoc QC. And after intensive study, we described that the high dilution that the sex semen had through the process, the nuclear staining and incubation, the mechanical forces and pressure inside of the system, the exposure to UV laser and the electric charge to the cell, and the post-sorting centrifugation, and freezing and thawing protocols, all these steps were compromising a lot the viability of the sex sorted cell. So these evaluations were done in each step by the DNA fragmentation. So we were submitting the semen on each step to different treatments and evaluating this by DNA fragmentation to be sure what was really causing the most damage and the most stress to the sperm cell. And the main result was that the sorting process itself was the biggest problem we had. So we developed a process and where we tried to standardize the temperature, concentration, pH, and oxidative state on all the steps of the procedures to get a stabilization during the whole process of this temperature, concentration, pH, and oxidative state. To this whole process and to all the changes together, we gave the name SexedULTRA. So SexedULTRA is not one extender or one machine. It is the general, all the changes together gave that name. So what is SexedULTRA? Again, SexedULTRA is a change in the production system, a equipment update, a better temperature control from the semen collection to the freezing, a stain optimization, a media and extenders changes, the pH control was completely changed, the oxidation reduction and a better control of the oxidation of the cells, and the dead sperm separation, previous sorting. This whole thing together is what we call SexedULTRA. And what did we get with SexedULTRA? The first physical evaluations, we found that the SexedULTRA in black here had better 0-hour motility, better 3-hour motility, better progressive motility at 0 hour, better 3-hour motility, much better 3-hour progressive motility, and a better chromosome integrity. And the huge update that the system had was in the equipment. Remember the first picture, that huge, heavy, and big machine that used 18 square meter to be able to work was changed initially by the Generation 2 machine that has 3 square meters, and the first one used to work from 3,000 to 5,000 cells per second, and this new machine here was running between 15,000 to 20,000 cells per second. So with the machine upgrade, plus the biochemical changes that we did, we were producing a much better quality semen. And we didn't stop there. Right after the Generation 2, we created the Generation 3 machine that is on the side here. That is what we mainly have in the ST labs today. This machine runs in a normal semen at 25 to 30,000 cells per second. Our semen today has no waiting time, and like I told you, all the steps of the ultra production included the ejaculate control and the collection schedule as well. We changed completely our collection schedule, and our bulls are collected today according to the machine time, and not needed to be semen be sit waiting for machines. So the whole process and the whole schedule was changed. So, and that was tested. One of the companies that tested the product was GGI in Germany, and in this trial, we offered GGI semen with the same bulls, 5 or 6 different bulls with 4 different treatments, and compared that SexedULTRA with 4 different treatments, and compared that with their conventional semen AI. And we can easily see here that the same bull with XY, here what I say XY means the old sex semen, we had a non-return rate a lot lower than SexedULTRA with a 2.1 million, and this 2.1 million lower than the 3 million straw, and that a lot lower than 4 million cells straw. And 4 million cell straw in this trial had a little bit higher conception, non-return rate compared with the conventional semen. As you can see here, and easy to see in the next slide, so 4 million semen was very similar or equal to conventional semen, and a lot higher than the old system or the old sex semen. But we had problem already at that time to produce 2 million semen from those young genomic bulls. So how are we going to produce 4 million if we are, tight to be able to produce enough for the market with 2 million? Again, the changes in our collection plans and the collection plan and the schedule of the bulls per week allowed us to double the concentration of our semen. So all our ST semen today, Ultra, is produced with 4 million cells per straw. And that semen was evaluated, as I told you, by DNA concentration, but it was evaluated as well on our system of IVF production and in vivo production. To explain a little bit what we're doing, all our donors, Holstein heifers, run through a feed efficiency test with minimum. The ones with the minimum genomic requirements are transferred to repro barn with a minimum of age of 11 months. They are scanned to check for ovary size, number of follicles, uterine horns diameter, and then start on daily heat observation. At first sign of heat, natural heat, they are moving to the superovulation barn to start superovulation protocols. The protocol is standard. We use the reference heat. We treat the heifers to generate on day 4. 2 days later, we start FSH. The heifers receive 4 days or 8 shots of FSH. This dose varies according to the vet requirement. And they receive it only 2 inseminations with 4 million semen. One at 18 hours after standing heat, and the second AI at 26 hours after standing heat. Just to compare here what we're doing today, what we used to do before. In the past, we were doing 2 straws of 5 million in the first AI of the old semen, and 2 straws of 5 million of 24 hours or 26 hours and we were spending 4 straws of 5 million per donor. Today we are using only 2 straws of 4 million per donor. And what we got was, with the old sex semen, flushing young heifers in 112 flushes, we got 4.4 viable embryos per flush, 2.8 frozen embryos per flush, with a fertilization rate of 75.7%. When we introduced the SexedULTRA, we went up to 6.1 viables per flush, 4.8 frozen embryos per flush, with an 85.5 fertilization rate. So, SexedULTRA gave us a close to normal embryo production on in vivo collections, and gave us a lot, or to the market, a lot more economical way to use semen on in vivo embryo production. Just to see better, what we have in pink is SexedULTRA, and what we have in blue is the old sex semen. We can see that we had more collection with SexedULTRA, but a lot more number with SexedULTRA. Comparing frozen embryos per flush and viable embryos per flush, there was a big difference between SexedULTRA and old sex semen on frozen embryos, and on the viable embryos per flush as well. And if we show here, break down here, only the fertilization rate, so SexedULTRA was a lot more efficient than the old sex semen. And this is included here just to show, during this study, we found that all the bulls in red are the same family of bulls. They are all brothers from the same sire. See the average embryo production in those bulls of the same family compared with the whole thing. The consistency in the average, it's very interesting. And the same thing on viable embryos, percentage of viable embryos per flush on these brothers. So just a curiosity. Now, talking about IVF, all the treatments during the SexedULTRA study were tested by IVF. Just here, just an example of 1 week IVF embryo production with Jersey bulls with old sex semen and SexedULTRA. So the summary is that SexedULTRA had 51.7% embryo development compared to 30% on the old sex semen. And that is on the slaughterhouse oocytes. And the hatching rate was 50% for old sex semen and 70% for SexedULTRA. But the interesting thing here was not the 70%. The hatching of the SexedULTRA embryos was happening a lot earlier on day 8 than the embryos produced with the old sex semen. What we understand that these embryos had a better quality. And on IVF production in the slaughterhouse, again, just to see the difference here between day 7 blastocyst comparing old sex semen with SexedULTRA, a higher production rate for both for SexedULTRA compared to old sex semen. We had again 30% blastocyst rate and 50% the day 8 hatching, 51% day 7 blastocyst for SexedULTRA, and 70.5% day 8 hatching for SexedULTRA. Now, evaluating the IVF production of old sex semen and SexedULTRA on the real-life OPU of 7 to 12 months old Holstein heifers in our genomic program, we had here comparing conventional semen, old sex semen, and SexedULTRA. We found that the embryo blastocyst rate for conventional semen was 32%, the old sex semen was 18%, and SexedULTRA was 46%. In the same environment and same group of heifers with same treatment. I did not separate them by treatment, just everything together. And the preg rate was very similar in conventional semen and SexedULTRA and higher than old sex semen. And the blastocyst, number of blastocysts per OPU for conventional semen we had at that time on the great majority of non-stimulated heifers was 2 embryos per aspiration, old sex semen 1.3, and SexedULTRA by itself 3.1. I eliminated from these numbers the reverse sort semen because this is the great majority of our works is done with reverse sort semen, and reverse sort is very similar to SexedULTRA. But I remove it to make it easier to show the difference of the commercial semen. And you can see the great difference of SexedULTRA in blastocyst rate. Again, higher, much higher blastocyst developed for SexedULTRA compared with the other kind of semen, and higher number of blastocysts per OPU on SexedULTRA compared with the other commercial semen. And the IVF embryo production, the preg rate was very similar between conventional semen and SexedULTRA, and a lot higher than the old sex semen. Our genomic heifers program was set up a long time ago, since the genomic program started, and there was one rule: produce embryos of those young heifers no matter what. It's a different approach of what we heard here yesterday and today. So we were supposed to produce embryos under a very low cost. A lot of things that, of the fixed cost, our operation was set, our technicians were there, everything was working, so let's OPU these animals. And we tried to set up a protocol that was like this. Try to aspirate 3 times every 5 days, rest the heifer for 1 cycle, and then aspirate again 3 times. Rest for 1 cycle, start again 3 aspirations. In this model, we average here 1.85 embryos per heifer. This is interesting, and pay attention that we were able to make 6 aspirations in 34 days. And evaluating the embryo production, the oocyte production, the non-viable oocytes, and the blastocyst rate, we saw that we had a decrease of the oocyte production, a decrease on the non-viable oocyte production, but there was almost no change on the blastocyst rate. What we understand that this reduction on the number of oocytes was compensated by the better competence of the oocytes on repeated aspirations. And you can see here that we are evaluating to 10 aspirations per heifer. We had heifers that started in the program with 7 months and had 21 aspirations, 22 aspirations. So as we aspirate, we were getting better oocytes. And this, I didn't include here to make it shorter. This oocyte competence was not affected much by on the repeated aspirated heifers summer, spring, summer, or fall. So the second schedule we had was 14 days interval without stimulation, same program. We were aspirating 2 times, resting the heifers, and aspirating 3 times again after a rest, and repeating the same schedule in these heifers. And this whole procedure, if we consider the same pattern of 6 aspirations, we were doing in a period of 63 days, and we were getting 2 embryos per OPU with no stimulation. And the third schedule was heifers that were below average in embryo production and oocyte production were driven to a OPU, a stimulated OPU schedule, where we are using a similar system that we had. We put cedar in, 2 days of FSH, AM, PM FSH, OPU on day 6, and then 7 days later start the heifer again in the same protocol. And using the 6 OPUs schedule or evaluation, we had in 6 aspirations, we had the average of 3.84 embryos per aspiration on the stimulated heifers. And when you go to the overall evaluation of the 2 programs, we see that on the 5 days interval, we had 11.1 embryos in 6 aspiration. On 14 days interval without stimulation, we have 12 embryos per heifer. And after 14 days with FSH, we had 23 embryos per heifers. But the interesting thing is, this program here had 34 days length for 6 aspiration. This had 40.7, and this one had 60 days length. So if we do and consider that we're repeating more than 6 aspiration, and we go to 12 aspirations, to add the same number of days and do 10 aspirations on the heifers without stimulation, we were getting the same number of embryos in the same period, non-stimulated and stimulating heifers. This is the results we had. What is the conclusion? I heard here that we had death, we had adhesions, we had cysts, we had, many kind of problems. Did we, ST, had the same problem? Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We had close to 2.2 heifers with adhesions per 1,000. I did this calculation to try to do the same calculation that Transova said. We had a little bit more adhesions per heifer. But if you do the math of FSH spent in a system like this, that we were aspirating average 25 heifers per day, 5 days per week, the expenses in FSH was going to be enormous. Maybe a lot more than the whole system cost for us. So, in my experience, doing IVF since 1999 in Brazil, and what I did here in the US, what I would recommend, if I was a vet working in the market offering my services, I would recommend everyone to use FSH on any kind of donors. What protocol that vary, I'd like to say that we got to evaluate the costing period of the protocol according to the embryo production to response of each cow has. We didn't have time to do that because we were doing so often. We had the risk of inducing some adhesions. Yes, we did. But we were able, maybe one of the top cows that we have today was from a cow that produced very few oocytes, and we made one embryo from her, and this embryo today, this heifer today, sire, her clone sire, the #1 bull of the breed. So this is a very intensive and a particular work that we did in-house. We're not offering this to the customer. And I think we learned a lot with it. And the numbers were very high, in my opinion, very intensive. And this is what we got. So the conclusion of my presentation here today is that the new SexedULTRA really improves the fertility of the frozen semen. SexedULTRA showed the equivalent fertilization rate compared to conventional semen on supraovulating donors. The new generation of SexedULTRA reduced the semen cost on supraovulated embryo production. SexedULTRA has a very similar performance to conventional semen on IVF embryo production, reducing the difference between bulls. In the past, everybody knows that the variation between bulls on sex semen was very high. And the use of FSH stimulation raises significantly the oocyte competency in the embryo production on Holstein heifers. So this is what I had to show. Thank you very much.